Good evening. It's past evening here. It's about 1 a.m. This is an exterior door. I've got a little bit of that low-level paranoia brewing in the back of my mind, which should set a good tone for this. This is going to be an overview and a review of this very weird sci-fi book, which I don't. It'll make more sense later, but I really don't understand how it was published. But it had this. The fact that it exists is kind of funny, so that's the reason for making this video, because it's kind of unbelievable that it exists, and it also has some despite being a hot mess, it has kind of interesting ideas in it. It's very poorly written though, so it's not worth reading, but I feel like it's worth talking about. It's got that kind of been through Spencer's backpack a couple times look. I got it in a used bookstore called Montana Valley Books in Alberton, Montana. It's been sitting around for a while, and I read it. The reason I got it originally is because the title is just so like unbelievable. So I got it just because it was strange. It's by A.T. Morton, who I couldn't find anything about. Published 1992. I did actually read the entire book, which is not what I normally do with books. It's kind of silly that I did it with this book because it's not a good book. The title seems like a joke, but based on the content of the book, it's not a joke. The phrase gaslight, this book does not have anything to do with gaslighting. The phrase gaslighter in this book has a sci-fi meaning that is totally unrelated to the normal meaning of the word. I swear I'll get past the title in a second here, but it's hard to parse it grammatically. It's referring to two different characters. So the gaslighter is the alien. War hero Starflash is the guy on the cover. The way this book is set up is that it has two parallel storylines, and it switches between them like every chapter. They're not related, except that they coincide at one point kind of deep into the book. The fact that there are two parallel storylines adds nothing. It seems like the author maybe planned to make them like fit together eventually, but then just never got around to it. So one of the weird things about this book is that the two different storylines, one of them follows Starflash and one of them follows the gaslighter, whose name is Safrex, and they're written in dramatically different registers. So the Starflash story is in like a cliche sort of pulpy adventure sci-fi style, and the Safrex register is just way over detailed, way over developed. It's in like a really dry, almost like technical tone. But the other thing is that there are specific things about this book that are kind of poorly thought out. For example, the entire structure of the book is poorly thought out. But it's not just a bad sci-fi book. I kind of found myself interested in the ideas the author was presenting, even though he did it terribly. The first storyline follows, his name is Ged Starflash. He's a retired war hero. The story starts with him tending his orchard, so he's kind of like a Cincinnatus. Okay, so here's another one of the weird things in this book. Morton does the sci-fi thing of having the social structures be exactly the same, but making up different words to give an air of distant future type. You know what I mean? So rather than call his wife, Morton calls, and Starflash calls his wife his dom femme. Dom femme stands for domestic female. That's kind of a weird. I know that's not what he meant, but it's the same thing as the phrase gaslighter is used so much in this book, and it doesn't mean what it means, and it just kind of makes me feel like I'm going crazy. So Starflash has retired. He's tending his orchard. His wife, or his dom femme, gets kidnapped by space pirates, and they demand a ransom, thinking that Starflash is wealthy because he's a war hero. I don't know. As much as the Safrex alien storyline is overdeveloped, the Ged Starflash storyline is underdeveloped. He is not wealthy, and so he's forced to go rescue his dom femme rather than pay the ransom, which, is fairly contrived, but whatever. So yeah, I mean the Starflash sections were a little difficult to get through. So he reaches the space pirate ship to save his wife. The space pirates find him, put him in a little prison cell on their ship, take him to a jungle planet and maroon him there. Is picked up from the jungle planet after a little bit of sort of vague survival by human-eating aliens, which is of the type of Safrex. He is put in a prison on their ship, escapes from the prison cell, makes his way across the. By the way, the alien ship is like the size of a city. It's called so yet another weird thing. The ship is called the Flying Lotus, which I don't think is where the musician Flying Lotus got his name. It's like irritating. Like it makes my brain itch. All these weird things. Like he uses the phrase gaslighter constantly, but there's no acknowledgement that it's a phrase that exists outside of this sci-fi context. He constantly uses the phrase dom fem, and then the ship is called the Flying Lotus. It does make me feel like I'm being gaslit. So Starflash escapes from the prison cell on this alien ship, makes his way across the entire ship to reach an escape pod, gets an escape pod, goes back to the pirate ship, rescues his wife, and goes back to tending his orchard. So that's the Ged Starflash storyline. The point where his storyline coincides with the Safrex storyline is Starflash is making his way across the mothership, ends up in this hallway, or like in this gallery, with transparent tubes set into one of the walls of the hallway, and with colorful, like complex colorful flames in the tubes. Okay, I'm going to go on to the Safrex storyline. The point that the two storylines coincide will make more sense once I've explained the Safrex thing. So probably what you've been irritatedly waiting to hear is, what does gaslighter mean in this book? The species of alien, the species name that Morton made up is Galarian. So on the Galarian homeworld, there's this special type of blue gas that occurs naturally. They ignite it, and it produces what Morton describes as like complex, colorful, or geometric patterns when the gas combusts. Igniting this gas is an important art form for the Galarians. So that is what gaslighting is. It's like one of the fine arts. And Safrex is a gas lighter. Or the other phrases that are used are like flame sculptor, but mostly he uses the phrase gaslighter, which just makes me like twitch with rage and confusion. I guess I should emphasize that the gaslighting for the Galarians is pretty culturally important, and the way that they do it on the mothership is they have big cylindrical chambers with a nozzle in the center of the chamber at the bottom that releases gas, and then it's ignited using so that's one of the things that Morton kind of, I guess, just didn't bother to look into. So he uses interchangeably the words voltage, current, power, and charge to describe how the gas is ignited. So the point is that it's some kind of electrical ignition. I guess I'll just go over other details of gaslighting. So because they're on a spaceship, Morton details how resulting chemicals from the burning of the gas are recovered and recycled at great thermodynamic cost to the mothership, because they've mined all the blue gas on Galaria, so there's a limited supply. The way that gaslighters change the appearance of the gas when it burns is with a big array of knobs, most of which are for modulating something about the electricity. Oh, and I should emphasize how overwritten this is. He goes into so much detail and builds up this whole history of gaslighting with a unnecessary system of dates. Instead of AD, he has an alien version of it. He talks about the discovery of gaslighting. The Galarians have a myth that ancient Galarians on their jungle. By the way, the planet that Starflash is dropped on is the Galarian homeworld. So the mythological origin of gaslighting for the Galarians is that There's kind of a philosophical component to this book that must have been intentional, but this is a poor framing device for the ideas that it seems like Morton was actually trying to approach. I'll try to get through the details of gaslighting as quickly as possible, but they are kind of relevant. So every factor in the process of gaslighting affects the end appearance of the gas, including the shape of the chamber, the nozzle, the shape of the atmosphere inside, the amount of gas used, the pressure of the chamber, and obviously and significantly the electrical. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it precisely because it's not explained precisely in the book, but something like the electrical signal that's sent into the chamber or something. I mean, it's not the way that he actually describes it is that there are rings of conductive material down. So the hallway that Starflash ends up walking through is this chamber, or is this gallery of gas chambers. And I don't know if I already said this. When the reaction that Starflash has when he walks through it is, it's amazing that a species that eats humans could make something so beautiful when he sees the gas. So while I'm on this topic, Morton mentions at some point in the book that part of the justification that the Galarians give for eating humans is that they believe that humans can't detect a wide enough range of electromagnetic radiation with our eyes to truly appreciate the art of gaslighting, which is their big thing culturally. So they use that as a justification for believing that humans are like lower consciousness. So the art of gaslighting is described as mysterious and fickle. There's a whole mystique of how difficult and how unpredictable it is that goes along with the art form. It's kind of a significant plot point. Okay, there's a significant scene that's one of the few like readable passages in the whole book. As a young aspiring gaslighter, Safrex, there's an accident where the grating of the floor gets broken and there's a gas leak, so he can't see that well. He trips and his leg goes into the floor. One passage, which I have on PDF here. His robe was becoming heavy and wet from soaking in the gas, and his panic intensified. He desperately threw himself toward the maintenance alcove, and his leg plunged into the ragged hole in the grating and broke the already compromised silver pipeline completely in half. Safrex, the flame sculptor, cried out in shock. He looked over at the active chamber and saw the opaque flame continuing to dance geometrically. He yanked his trapped leg upward violently and freed it, allowing it to jerk upward further, catching the main ignition wire to the active chamber and breaking it in half. For a fragment of a second, Safrex's bare foot, which he had yanked from his boot when he freed his leg, touched both ends of the broken wire. The young gaslighter had become part of the circuit powering Chamber 36. For a moment, Safrex fell into an eternal dream, becoming the flame in the chamber and burning with excruciating heat. He felt his soul combust, and as it did, shimmering droplets of shattered glass rained down around him in more dimensions than he understood, and 1,000 blooming flowers and stars and tessellated flavors overwhelmed his mind. He hung, a burst of color suspended in a turbulent ocean of darkness, and then the moment passed. The wire fell away from his foot, and he heard himself scream out in pain. He fell unconscious. The wiring that he connects up to is connected to an active gas chamber at that time, burning gas, and it's chamber number 36, which comes up later in the book. So he concludes from this dramatic psychedelic experience that the gas, when ignited, has a consciousness, basically, like that it has an internal subjective experience while it's ignited, but has no sense organs. He performs further experiments deliberately, connecting himself up to the circuits, which, and by the way, it's described as extremely painful, but also kind of euphoric or something. He connects himself up to the circuits multiple other times and has the same experience where he has a dramatic psychedelic experience. And so that for him, that confirms that the gas, when lit, has a consciousness that he then becomes a part of when he joins the circuit. Using the information he collects from the experiments that he runs on himself, connecting himself to the circuit, he develops a highly sophisticated mathematical model of the specific ways in which the knobs alter not just the appearance of the gas when it's lit, but the internal subjectivity or the internal phenomenology of the gas. And he's able to use that system that he develops to create gas sculptures. They call them flame sculptures or gas sculptures in the book. He achieves unprecedented success and consistency in gaslighting. He becomes like the foremost gaslighter by using this model that he develops, and importantly too, he refuses to divulge his methods to anybody because he's achieved this high social status, and so he doesn't want to give up his competitive advantage. So he won't tell anybody how he's able to do it. He's very secretive about his theory and about the technical system that he developed.
Oh yeah.
In the book, it says Safrex added 5 additional arrays of voltage knobs to give him more granular control over in his mind, over the internal experience of the gas consciousness. That's why it's significant. The thing I was saying earlier about that he says gaslighting is a very mysterious art. So he's able to consistently and precisely create new beautiful gas works, which that's another thing that kind of gets to me with this book is the amount of times the word gas is used is like kind of overwhelming. He gets so confident in his theory that he totally ceases performing experiments on himself. He's able to achieve the results that he wants. He stops all empirical testing and just relies on the theoretical system that he's built up. That was the rise of Safrex. Now this is part 2, the fall of Safrex. That's not how the chapters are labeled, but that's sort of the structure of the Safrex storyline. So he achieves great success and he's renowned. He keeps his methods secret. What starts the descent of Safrex is that he stops being interested in the actual appearance of the gas as it's burning and becomes preoccupied with the internal subjective state of the gas consciousness, but as an artistic medium. It's not like he has a philosophical interest in it. He views it. It sort of seems like maybe you're supposed to get the sense that that he's kind of going crazy or something. But so he views the internal subjective state of the gas as the medium. So first, that induces him to return to involving himself in the circuit and experiencing the colorful, psychedelic, crazy experiences, which he believes is him joining with the consciousness of the gas. So initially, he starts trying to create beautiful internal subjective experiences for the gas. Then eventually, he loses interest in that and stops joining himself with the circuit and stops doing the experiments and starts working on theoretical ideas with his model of how the knobs alter the consciousness of the gas. Instead of trying to alter what you'd normally think of as the aesthetic experiences, the types of patterns you see or the types of sensations when you're part of the circuit, Safrex loses interest in that, stops experimenting, and starts developing models. So rather than the content of the experiences, he starts using the structure of the gas's consciousness as his artistic medium. The other interesting thing is that there are long periods in his career where he doesn't bother to do any experiments. So he's interested, it's almost like he's interested in his mathematical model as an aesthetic medium, but he frames it anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna move on now because I'm getting lost again. Go through the final progression of subjective states that I don't want to this is the only part of the book that I'm going to bother to go through in as granular detail exists in the text itself because I feel like it's interesting. But really, this book is not worth reading as a book. Hopefully this video is not too long, so maybe the ideas are worth consuming as in this form, or hopefully it's at least funny that it exists because it's just so off the rails. Safrex refers to the consciousness of the gas in chamber 36 as 36. That's the name he uses. The initial thing that he does when he starts playing with the structure of 36's subjectivity, he places 36 in a jungle like the Galarian homeworld and gives him no internal analytic or verbal abilities. So 36 is still in kind of a non-metacognitive state, and the jungle is the content of the experience. So that's the baseline when he starts investigating the structure. So then he places 36 in the jungle, gives it comprehensive knowledge of the jungle and also an assured awareness of the fact that its comprehensive knowledge is accurate. He gives it total power to change things in the jungle. So he basically makes it omnipotent and omniscient and sure that it is omnipotent and omniscient. And this results in the consciousness having an optimistic disposition and a consequentialist ethical attitude, in the words of, that's how Morton phrases it. After that, Safrax introduces uncertainty about the reliability of the consciousness's comprehensive knowledge about the jungle and about the extent of its power. So that induces, basically the consciousness stays consequentialist, but is less happy. It's more like anxious and Safrax views this as a win. He views each step in this succession as an aesthetic advancement. And it's unclear in the book whether that's because he likes the way that the model looks in these ways or because he's kind of sick, or maybe, to be clear, the second step is not that, it's not that the knowledge decreases. The consciousness has the same amount of knowledge about the jungle, but is less certain of the accuracy of that knowledge. So then the fourth gradation is that it switches from omniscience to extremely limited knowledge, but remains omnipotent. So this results in 36 feeling no responsibility for the consequences of its actions because it is assured that it can't predict the results, so it switches to like a deontological outlook. Morton says he has a pessimistic disposition and a deontological attitude. Okay, then the next gradation is extremely limited knowledge and practical helplessness. So not omnipotence, but almost no power to affect the environment at all. 36 is relieved of some angst in this state because of the added assurance of its inability to affect the world. So it's still deontological, but more optimistic. Then the next gradation is extremely limited knowledge, practical helplessness, and a deep uncertainty about the extent to which either one could be changed. So 36 is still practically helpless and knows almost nothing, but isn't sure to what degree it's within 36's own power to change either of those conditions. Right. Okay. So suffering increases in this state. So 36 can no longer justify the deontological outlook. It knows that it is almost helpless and almost totally ignorant, but it reverts to consequentialism because it isn't assured that it can't change those facts about its existence. So then on top of all that, the next gradation is that Safrax makes 36 preoccupied specifically with uncertainty about how much uncertainty itself could be alleviated. It's a subset of the uncertainty about knowledge. Okay, so at this point, the consciousness reacts by embracing nihilism, which frustrates Safrax, who finds nihilism as content and as a structure aesthetically unpleasant. So Safrax brings 36 into contact with undeniable proof of moral realism through intense emotional suffering, which induces a state of meta-aware extreme confusion. So similar in quality to like the original colorful psychedelic state, total confusion and chaos, but with meta-awareness. Suffering and awareness of suffering and awareness of suffering. You get the idea. This is, Safrax views this as the greatest achievement in the history of gaslighting. This state, to him, is the most beautiful subjective structure for the gas consciousness. Safrax runs into a theoretical dead end doing this investigation of the structure of the gas mind. And so he returns yet again to the experiments where he connects himself to the circuit. And at this point in his career, because he's given up on trying to modulate the voltages or whatever to create visually beautiful gas burning, he's kind of fallen out of favor with the society at large. And there's of course, there's a council of gaslighters in the story that are like exactly what you'd think. Yeah, so he still occasionally makes flame sculptures that everyone agrees are aesthetically beyond what anyone else is capable of, but he's not doing it consistently because he's totally lost interest in that aspect of gaslighting. He's viewed as like a great artist who's kind of gone to seed, or he's past his prime. Morton mentions a few times that the visual aesthetic quality of the flame sculpture is totally uncorrelated with the nature of the internal subjective experience of the consciousness. Safrex will eagerly tell anybody about his method and about his theory and about his basic realization that the gas is conscious. Because his method no longer holds any real competitive advantage, and he is not interested in prestige or in anything except his little weird world that he lives in. At this point in Safrex's career, this is the point in the story where the stories coincide. So Starflash is walking through the corridor. The array of knobs are on one side of the chambers, and there's a wall that the cylindrical chambers are set into, and on the other side is like the gallery where people view the flame sculptures. So Safrex sees Starflash through the cylinder, doesn't notify anybody. It's not an act of mercy. He's just indifferent. Late in his career, Safrex is forced by the council to take on an apprentice. That is part of their code or rules or something. I forgot to say, so all the gas chambers are controlled by the council. He loses his privileges to use more than one chamber, and he's relegated to chamber 36, which was the original one that he had the very first experience with. Okay, so he takes on an apprentice because they threaten to not let him use any of the chambers. By this point, he has resumed experiments completing the circuit. Safrex agreeing to take on an apprentice is described as a significant cultural or social event for the Galarians because Safrex was such a significant figure, but that he then fell out of favor. Morton talks about that Galarians were hoping that this apprentice would be like the next Safrex, and that he would be able to use Safrex's methods. There's a couple times in the book that Morton uses the phrase lit gas to describe I'm using the phrase flame sculptures because that's less offensive. Safrex's apprentice is the first person to listen to him. The apprentice agrees to try joining the circuit, experiences the excruciating pain that accompanies that, is also convinced that the gas has a consciousness. So then the apprentice goes and tells other people. Other people try the circuit thing. They too are convinced that the gas is internally conscious. The significant thing is that they view Safrex as like a perpetrator. They think that he's torturing the gas consciousness. Enough Galarians get the idea in their heads that Safrex is torturing the gas that he is put on trial and sentenced to death. When he's on trial, the council asks him why he would knowingly subject a consciousness to suffering in this way, and his defense is that all gaslighters could easily be doing the same thing, and that he just happens to know what he's doing. In his view, the random way in which other gaslighters go about their art is just as likely to accidentally induce equal or greater suffering than he induces in the gas. His execution is by burning, of course. Chamber 36 is permanently decommissioned, memorializing consciousness that was tortured by Safrex. Joining yourself with the circuit is made a capital crime, and gaslighting continues as usual, actually. Safrex is viewed as an isolated historical incident, and the art proceeds as it did before he existed. Morton says, quote, Safrex tried to induce every subjective condition he could imagine, with varied results, but he was in a near constant state of intellectual and artistic ecstasy. It seems kind of implied that the consciousness doesn't exist, is ignited, exists, and then when it goes out, it goes out. But it is possible that the burning gas is accessing a consciousness that exists all the time or something. I guess I should say one of the main things about this book that's interesting to me is the fact that Safrex is on such shaky epistemic ground. From the point that he has the initial psychedelic experience forward, he's totally convinced of his view of gaslighting the entire time, but it's like it doesn't occur to him that he could that the circuit, the electricity in the circuit could be inducing this experience in him, but that it could have nothing to do with the gas. But I don't know, it's kind of interesting because I guess the I guess it's possible that it is also inducing those states in the gas. It's also possible that Safarix was just doing these crazy torture experiments on himself. Even if you assume that that burning the gas does create a consciousness, he doesn't even double check that all the time. He's not always involving himself in the circuit so that he can make sure that the results inside the consciousness are what he expects. Later in his career, he's very certain that his model has perfect predictive power. Yeah, but he doesn't bother to confirm that. The degree to which his interest is purely theoretical has like it keeps ramping up over the course of his career.